Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cinematic Schematic, the official podcast of the Cinematropolis.com, your home to thoughtful conversations on film. I'm your host, Caleb Masters, and today we are talking about one of the greatest reunions in all of cinema history. It's bringing together two titans known for a powerful previous collaboration. We've been clamoring for a follow-up film for years. Of course, I'm talking about Dan Stevens and Adam Wingard reuniting for The Guest 2. Yes?
Yes.
The Guest 2.
Yep.
Oh, that wasn't the movie. Oh, shit.
This is the preview for The Accountant 2, right? Is that what we're talking about?
The Accountant 1, now the number one movie on Netflix out of nowhere, weirdly. I don't know how that happened. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We're reviewing the new Adam Wingard movie that does happen to star Dan Stevens, Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire. We'll start with an icebreaker question, as we always do, before jumping into a spoiler-free review where we'll provide a verdict on the film, and then we'll conclude the show with an in-depth spoiler discussion. An in-depth spoiler discussion. Joining me today, he's got more charisma than Dan Stevens for sure, but he's also a lot smoother than Dan Stevens. He's my co-host. He's an award-winning Oklahoma filmmaker, and he has, in fact, ridden on the back of Godzilla. Laron Chapman, welcome back to the show.
As always, it is a pleasure to co-host alongside you, no matter what film is on the roster.
Oh, I feel like this was a passive jab that Laron did not like the movie. Oh, this is going to be juicy. I am also very excited to welcome, he's returning to us after a couple of episodes. First up, our Fast X review, I think might have been the most recent one. Chad Parizman, a podcast host and producer, principal and founder at Ader Communications. Chad, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited for another big popcorn flick where we, maybe we get some people that we thought were dead returning to the screen. Very excited.
So this is Fast 11. I just can't figure out what movie we're reviewing this week. The Guest 2 is it Godzilla x Kong? Chad, always a pleasure to have you on. And one of these days, I'm going to get you not a big popcorn film, but this time I thought, I don't know, it just seems like a good time to hang out with Chad, talking apes and not dinosaurs, dragons, I don't know. Last and certainly not least, here to correct me on everything I just said about Godzilla is, you know him from most recently, he was in our double feature episode, the Dungeons and Dragons versus the Mario movie episode, where we discovered that versus formula only works when both of the movies are good. He is the Soonercon director of IT and development, Caleb Haldane, my arch nemesis. I am the Alpha, you are the Omega. Welcome back to the show, sir.
Well, thank you. I do have lots of thoughts on this one, and it's big apes and big lizards, not dinosaurs.
Dang it. Yoshi, dinosaur or lizard?
Dinosaur. They say a dinosaur.
Yep. Dinosaur. Laron, Yoshi, dinosaur or lizard? I mean,
I feel like I have to go with the expert here because, I would have guessed lizard, but said, but if it's stated otherwise.
In Super Mario World, they specify he's a dinosaur.
I mean, I guess in the movie, he is a dinosaur in the movie. Chad, would you concur that Yoshi is in fact dinosaurs?
Yes. I mean, all dinosaurs are lizards, but not all lizards are dinosaurs, right? Is that the way it works?
Fair. Yeah.
That sounds like great logic that exists on the internet. I trust it. Gentlemen, I don't know. This conversation, I've been really looking forward to this all day because this is a movie that my initial reaction was, wow, I wonder what we're going to talk about when we sit down and talk about the show. And then I sit down to prep the show and I was like, you know what? I think there's actually a lot of cool stuff to talk about in this movie. Before we get to today's review, listeners, I wanted to note that if you enjoy listening to the show, enjoy the conversation, you can support us by subscribing and leaving us a rating and a review on your preferred podcast app. Specifically Apple Podcasts. Do us a solid. I think we're going to be doing some giveaways later this year, so maybe stay tuned. Check us out. Also, social media, facebook.com/The Cinematropolis. We're on all other channels at The Cinematrop. Enough of the plugs, though. Let's get on over to our icebreaker question. So, Laron, what is the title of this movie?
Exactly. I don't know if there's a correct way to say it. I know what it's not. I don't know what it is, though. I know it's not Godzilla versus Kong, but but I'm just saying X. I'm just saying.
So you would say Godzilla X Kong?
Godzilla X Kong or Godzilla times Kong.
Okay. Or, Chad, what would you call this movie?
I also was like Godzilla X Kong, but I heard today that like the X is supposed to just be dropped. Like
Yeah.
it's
I've
like
heard
a
that too.
Yeah.
it's like a collab. Like it's just Godzilla Kong. Like as if Godzilla was the adjective. I don't know. Like
Does that make Godzilla a member of the Donkey Kong crew? DK.
So this
Yes.
is actually a common way to do things in anime, like Hunter x Hunter, right? It's not Hunter x Hunter. And they do that a lot where they have the X there, but they drop it when they say it. And so I wonder if they're trying to lean into that type of naming.
Also, it could be a cultural thing. Okay, that's
Yeah.
cool.
You know, I was thinking it was more of a marketing thing because you see with a lot of marketing collabs, you see brand X brand, you know, whenever there's like an influencer partnering with a brand or two brands working on something. I've seen that a lot.
Yeah, I was thinking Fast and the Furious, 4, like, how they just drop the articles and just say like, okay, so it's not the Fast and Furious, it's just Fast and Furious. Like that changes the title somehow because it's like, but yeah.
Firstly, I hate Godzilla Kong. I think that's a terrible title.
Yeah, I do.
But also, I think that your explanation actually makes the most sense. I hadn't considered the cultural context. But given that the first word in the title is Godzilla, a Japanese cultural icon, that would make sense that they're sort of leaning into it. And I hear Adam Wingard likes anime. To clarify, listeners, this is Godzilla, Kong, the New Kingdom.
colon the new
The New Kingdom.
But there's no colon on the poster. It's just like GXK.
No colon.
No colon.
The new empire.
the new empire.
It was confusing for sure.
Coming out a week after Ghostbusters, The Frozen Empire, and I will not tell you how many times I was talking with friends and I thought we were talking about Godzilla and they were talking about Godzilla. It really happened. They're like, Frozen Empire, and they'd say it really fast. I was like, oh yeah, I can't wait to see,
I've been
Godzilla.
saying the new empire way too often. Just mash them both together.
Godzilla vs. Kong was the predecessor that came out in 2021. This is the sequel, Godzilla X Kong. And it is actually, in a lot of ways, a sequel to that movie specifically, which in itself is sort of like the Avengers of the MonsterVerse. Anyway, we'll get more into it, but I wanted to clarify that up front in case you're saying, oh, I watched this on streaming. No, this is Godzilla X Kong, the New Empire. So anyway, speaking of franchise crossovers, like perhaps Godzilla, Kong, and the Ghostbusters, our icebreaker question today is, what is the next franchise crossover that should be brought to the big screen? So some examples there would have been, Godzilla X Kong, X Ghostbusters. You could do something like Fast and Furious X Gone in 60 Seconds, or Dragon Ball X Superman, or my favorite, and I think this one, studios, especially after the recent success of the movie, should really consider Madam Web X Nostradamus. I think that there's a lot of meat on those bones, and I hear Sony is all about digging more into that well for Madam Web. So those are some examples. So Chad, I will start with you. What is the next franchise crossover that should be brought to the big screen?
So I think you know this. I'm a big Disney guy. I think we should just get the finally like we got this in the last Wreck-It Ralph movie, right? We've gotten this with I've been getting into Lorcana. If you guys haven't checked that out, it's like Magic the Gathering but Disney. I think we should just have the Disney multiverse, right? Like they were supposed to do this with Kingdom Keepers. It never really happened. But I just think like Disney should be going, forget the live action like recreation of Lion King. It should be like Scar and Maleficent team up, and then like Aladdin and Ariel and right, like, and then Mickey needs to come in. Like, I don't know why we haven't gotten it. Like, it exists in the parks, it exists in video games. Like,
and
they did an awesome job on this with DuckTales. If you guys watch the reboot of that, like, I don't know why we don't have the like live action Disney cinema already.
Didn't they have, I felt like in the early, millennialness showing right here. I feel like when I was like between the ages of like 9 and 14 on the Disney Channel, they had a bunch of crossovers. There was a show.
A lot of the series, I think.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to say like something like DuckTales or something like that. Like where it's like there were more. There were some merging of them in like
there was a show, and maybe listener, either one of you or the listeners can call me out, thecinemetropolis@gmail.com. But there was a show where it was like all the villains were in like a lounge watching shows, and it was like a kind of like an office drama, but set in like a mobster show, but with the Disney villains. I'm totally drawing a blank on it. But it was it because you would see that. You would see Jafar sitting across the table from like Scar, and there would be a whole like plot about how they were going to do something. I don't even remember. I was kind of aged out of it at that point, but I remember flipping through and being like, huh.
I vaguely remember these too. These might have just been teasers for other products.
Maybe.
Like,
Yeah.
I feel like I very distinctly remember like Jafar and Shere Khan across the table from each other in like a mobsters around a table kind of conversation going on.
I swear that there was like a 10, maybe it was probably promoting something else, but I feel like it was more than a commercial though. It was like a vignette or something, They would play like the 5-minute, 10-minute versions of it or something. I don't know.
But like you said, they all exist in this universe. And when you see the bumper right before it goes on, like we're seeing like Ariel swimming in the water. We're seeing, all the different elements. It's like they're all in this kingdom. They're saying they're all in this magical kingdom. Why is there not a feature-length film?
We've gotten it so many other especially video games, right? Like they've done a whole bunch of these video games of crossovers and things like that, right? Even into oh my god, blanket. What's the Final Fantasy? Kingdom Hearts, right? Like we had that. Yeah, like they should just go for it already.
So if it's a multiverse, does the Jungle Book exist in the same plane as Tailspin, or are they two different multiverses?
Oh man.
Oh, like is there a Baloo that talks?
Yeah.
And
Did
doesn't
Baloo
talk?
become a pilot, or is there a Baloo from the Jungle Book and a Baloo from Tailspin, and they are from different
they've got to be different universe. Like there's a universe where
totally curious.
where like animals talk but still live in the wild, and one where animals have also went through they also know how to build planes and fly.
That's got to be the same universe as DuckTales. There's the universe, all the anthropomorphized cartoons.
So they all appear like did anyone else watch that DuckTales reboot?
I watched the first 3 episodes. It was very charming and fell off. No.
They got super, if you're like a Disney Afternoon fan, like they had Baloo and Kit, the gummy bears showed up, like Darkwing Duck, like they went full in, like they were basically like the Disney Afternoon universe is legit, and they all are gonna come into this DuckTales show that I think ended way too early, but did have actually a satisfying final season.
But I was surprised by how early that show wrapped up. I mean, again, I'm part of the problem because I was like, that's super charming. I really liked the first 3 episodes and never got back to it. So obviously I'm part of the problem. But also I was
even back then though, DuckTales, Darkwing Duck and Tailspin were all in the same universe because Launchpad shared between 2 and Gizmo Duck shared between the other 2.
What a time to be alive. I
know.
When we were kids.
Just bring in gargoyles somehow, which is still the greatest.
They keep baiting that we're going to get a Gargoyles live action. I don't know if we need it, but I still.
Hey, listen, I'm tipping my hand a little bit here, but I don't know if you guys have been watching X-Men 97, but I'm like, just give me that, but with gargoyles. I mean, and I'm all about X-Men right now, but let's just do that with all the good ones.
Yes, agreed.
All right, Caleb Haldane.
Yeah, I think like an obvious one would have been Mario versus Sonic.
Yeah.
But I think I'm going to switch it up and go
They fought at the Olympics, just not on the big screen,
versus Detective Pikachu. That way we could actually stay in the same style.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And I think that there's a debate there. Sonic's pretty fast, but Pikachu, especially when supercharged, can sprint.
Well, and he can shoot lightning. So like he doesn't always have to stand pace. He's got the ranged attack.
All right. So important question. I'm into this.
Yeah.
In fact, I won't for. Sometimes you just turn on a movie late, your brain dead, you want something, maybe you fall asleep. I turned on Detective Pikachu about a week ago, and man, I just gotta say, I love that movie's a sweet little movie. I want another one. Number 1. Number 2, who was murdered in this crossover? Is Knuckles the one who's murdered? Is it Robotnik? Was it one of the Chos? Who's the murder victim in the Detective Pikachu Sonic crossover?
Yeah, it's definitely like murder mystery, right? Like because we're gonna start from Detective Pikachu. So I think that we are doing like fugitive style where Sonic is being framed for whatever this murder is. Like he's got to jump from the train. Like we're gonna like fully embrace the fugitive theming for this. And
I need this right now.
see, when they make a Sonic 3, this is what I want. Yeah. It's the fugitive, but with Sonic, and and the detective is Pikachu. Right. Come on.
Yes. I mean, I how have we not had a movie with Ryan Reynolds and Jim Carrey in it together already? But
Come on, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Jim Carrey has shown with the Sonic franchise specifically that he's like, I'll take a paycheck, and do his normal shtick, and I love him for it. I love the Sonic movies for him specifically. I feel like that could happen. I feel like the stars could easily align. Someone in Hollywood needs to like get them together in a room. Laron, Chapman, what are your picks?
Okay, so to Chad, I'm to your Disney, I'm a horror hound, so I said that right. Horror hound.
Yes.
Horror hound. I need to clarify for our listeners. I mean, maybe I'm both, but but for the context of this conversation, I am a horror hound. So something I thought of was, who are two chatty horror icons that we haven't seen kind of duke it out? We did the Freddy versus Jason, which was kind of fun. I feel like they could have done a lot more with it, but I feel like I liked that trend. I wish we could have kept going with that. So something that came to mind was, I'd like to see Freddy duke it out with Candyman, since they live in kind of a similar liminal realm. And I was thinking I'd call it Freddy X Candyman Nocturnal Nightmares, so.
Are we getting OG Candyman back, or is this the
OG
reboot?
Okay. Candyman. Yeah, we need Tony Todd back.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I love the horror. And are they just fighting each other, or is it? Are they?
I feel like they've got to be haunting the people around them, and then for some weird, they're in the same realm. It's like maybe they're haunting the same people. I don't know. And then that's maybe that's the conflict between them. But yeah.
Well, I'm all about more horror crossovers. Frankly, we should do more of them, especially, and you and I have talked about this on the show and off the show, like Michael Myers. We're going to get more Halloweens, but seriously, they have, as a big fan myself of Michael. Yeah. That idea is like, there's
we've
absolutely every possible scenario. So the only thing left is the crossovers. So do more with it. Come on.
Yeah.
All right. So for my indie cinephiles out there, I got one for you. I want to do a crossover. Ryan Gosling, I'm Just Ken, hot right now, starring the upcoming Fall Guy. Let's go back to his roots, though, when he was an indie gem and cooler shit. Drive, and what movie feels like it could fit in the Drive universe in the same town? Drive X Nightcrawler, starring Jake Gyllenhaal.
Hey.
Where there's a murderer and Jake Gyllenhaal's trying to film it. A murder committed by Ryan Gosling's Drive.
Man, there's so much style already. I already see it. And that soundtrack is going to be sick.
Well, between Jake Gyllenhaal's like stocky big eyes,
the perfect foe.
Oh, come on, man. Yeah, I think let's bring it in there. I mean, they feel like they could be in the same city even. Come on. I think they're both LA, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Next up, you mentioned horror icons. So I'm thinking, and this one's not necessarily a character crossover, so I don't know, maybe it's cheating. Freddy X Inception. Come on. Let's make a follow.
Dream within a dream within
a dream. Yeah. And there's like a heist going on, but Freddy's there disrupting the heist at every level, trying to like sabotage.
Okay. So are we getting like the perpetual, the classic Nightmare on Elm Street soundtrack, like the piano, but like constantly slow down every time? So we get the orchestral version of the Fred
Hans Zimmer undertones.
Yes. And then all of a sudden there's just right in the middle of the score. Yes, absolutely. I understand that there's some weird legal stuff that's been going on with Jason, but Freddy, guys, I mean, I know they made a bad movie, 10 years ago?
Yeah.
Let's give them another go.
Yeah.
I think there's more meat on that bone, honestly. And last, it's actually a triple crossover. We've seen Alien versus Predator. We've in fact even seen Alien versus Predator 2 Requiem. But we haven't seen Alien X Predator. And what are they teaming up to fight? The Predators have gone so far into the future that when they invade Earth, it is overrun by the Terminators. And they realize that it's that if they want the resources on the planet, they have to wipe out the machines. So who better than to fight the machines than the acid spilling aliens? They team up together to fight the Terminators in the future. Disney, you own all of those, all three of those. You have the cards.
Who are we rooting for in that one? Like, do we then root for the Terminators? Because like, it's at least our planet.
I think you have to root for the Predator.
I think so, because it's the most human.
At this point. The most relatable.
It's a good question, Chad. I mean, I need to think through that one. But
I mean, there's got to be someone we root, like we're who's the audience standing in that? Like, we just hate them all and we just want them to destroy each other. So like, because I could see that, right? Like the Terminators hop on a ship and then head back towards like the Predator planet, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the setup for the sequel.
Well, they in that scenario, I feel like the Predators, as strong as they may be, are the underdog because they're just overwhelmed by the number of machines. And then actually, depending on how far you want to advance the Predator technology, maybe the Terminators have outpaced what they have, you know? So
But they also have like an honor code that none of those other races have,
Right.
which is why I think you've got to pin them in as the protagonist.
Yeah.
Let's say there's still, we'd have to come up with some reason why the humans are still a part of it. Maybe there's like enslavement camps that the Terminators run that they need humans for something, and they'll team up with the Predator.
Listen, I just need to know how much money you need. You know, like how much money do you need to make it? That's where I come in.
I just like I said, Disney owns all three of those properties. I mean, two of those three are on the upward right now, thanks to Prey and hopefully this upcoming Fede Alvarez Alien movie. So
yeah,
we will see. Follow-up question, and actually, this is a great question that Chad sent me, and you know, we are big fans. Sorry, Caleb Haldane, you're going to have to sit through us doing our obligatory, man, we love the Fast and Furious franchise. So Chad posed the question to me. He's like, so if Godzilla and Kong are the Rock and Vin Diesel of the MonsterVerse, which is which? And I was like, that's $1 million question. The answer will tell us how we feel about these particular characters in the movie. So Laron, I'll start with you. Which is which?
So I gave, and listeners, I gave this a lot of thought. I feel like The Rock has to be Godzilla. And Vin Diesel has to be King Kong. And the reason I say this, I feel like, and maybe this isn't fair, one of you can tell me, but I feel like Godzilla has probably more popularity, right? Or more content, or more films in general, more reach,
Yeah,
you know.
so yeah.
And The Rock seems to have outpaced, you know, Vin Diesel in terms of the action star. Like he has, I mean, Vin Diesel has a lot of Fast and the Furious movies. But I feel like The Rock has saved so many franchises that he feels like the Godzilla in this equation. And so
he's also the king of his own kingdom. He's right now, we are in the week before WrestleMania, and he's threatening to come back to wrestling for good. And I use the word threatening realistically here. So, you know, just saying he's kind of got that, like, not only is he more popular, but also within the context of his career, he's like, yeah, I paid my dues in Japan before I went international. But he's still king of Japan.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
That's a good answer. I fundamentally disagree with it, but but before I turn it over to that, I was going to pass it to you, Shad. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not opposite. I mean, right, we started with Godzilla, so it makes sense that Dom is the Godzilla, right? We get Kong later, just like we get, we don't get The Rock until 5. Clearly, Letty is Mothra in this scenario. Like, right, like Mothra's the queen to Godzilla's kingdom reign. Even some of the fight scenes here, we get that suplex by Kong to Godzilla. Like, I just think that they don't want to work with each other, but they also realize, like, the paycheck, like, we're getting another, right, like, not to jump ahead, but like, we're getting another one of these movies, right?
Oh yeah,
like, there's no doubt there's another Godzilla Kong in our future, and we can talk at the end of, like, where does it go, and who has the better outlook right now, them or Fast 11. It's no doubt both of these are right, like, two characters that don't want to team up, but clearly need to continue to print a lot of money.
Audiences continue to insist they should be together, even though they themselves and their brand owners are like, no, why would you keep doing this to us?
Which oddly has a lot of correlation between The Rock and Vin Diesel, their careers, their careers throughout this process, because they didn't like each other. I think they're on better terms now.
No. I think The Rock's just like, Black Adam didn't work. My rationale is, listen, Vin Diesel, both the character and the actor, is very moody, much like Godzilla in this specific movie. I don't feel like Godzilla is generally moody, but in this movie I felt like a very kind of annoyed, a little bit of attitude for this one, much like Dom. And also, without giving too much away, he does have allies that he summons in from time to time. Could be humans, could be other monsters, could be superpowers. We'll talk about that more in the spoiler section. But, much like Dom, he just turns it on. All of a sudden, he's a superhero. He goes from I can drag race cars to I can heist this super safe out of this bank or this police station in Brazil. And then this wrench might as well be Thor's hammer. Yeah. You know what I mean? Come on.
Where did they get the resources? We never asked this question, but it's fine. We're 10 movies in. We can no longer ask these questions.
No. Everyone else who's if they're not in, everyone just looks at us like we're crazy people. Yes. Caleb Haldane. I don't even know if you were up on the Fast and Furious franchise. What do you think?
Not as much, but I have to say I'm gonna pull the which one cares about the family more. That's not Godzilla. Dom is clearly King Kong.
It's a good argument.
Yeah. The Rock. He just by default becomes Godzilla because Dom is like we've got King Kong can be just as moody. We've got the family is everything to him, and it even drives a lot of this story here. So I would have to say that Dom is actually Kong.
The family context is pretty strong.
Yeah.
I mean, I disagree, but I can see that argument, right? Even to the point where Kong now ends up with an adopted son by the end of this movie. Like that kind of tracks with where we are in Fast and Furious 2.
Dom's got the wrench. Kong, and this is on the poster, has the power glove. Which, by the way, Power Glove is making a comeback in 2024.
I thought he also has that axe, like, which has just been laying around.
Yeah. Oh, man. I guess I wonder where that was in the last movie. I don't know.
No, that's right. He makes it in the last movie.
Was it the last movie? Did he make it? Okay.
It's Godzilla's scale.
That's right.
Yeah.
I know he finds it in the last movie.
No, he makes it. It's one of Godzilla's scales. And
no, but it's like what the power source was when he like first discovered. I just watched I rewatched all of these. They're like it's like and when he pulls it out, it like turns it on, and there's this like loop around that actually looks like Godzilla. There's like a Godzilla energy pattern in the floor.
Godzilla was in temple.
I think it was one of his scales, but an ancestor made it. Is the way that is the interpretation that I took.
That now.
The lore is rich, and I did rewatch it, but I will say it was a very passive rewatch. I might have been doing a couple of other things, so important details I missed there. Well, listeners, which member of the family are Godzilla and Kong? Let us know. Social media channels, Facebook, Threads, sort of, Instagram, X,
loose
at the Cinematrop, loose threads, or just send me an email at thecinematropos@gmail.com. All right, well, without further ado, it's time to get into our spoiler-free review of Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire.
We've discovered a signal. She can feel it. Kong, Godzilla, they can feel it too. Something is coming. Something even they're afraid of.
You feel like going for a ride?
Thought you'd never ask.
Just try not to swallow your tongue.
What?
Oh my God!
Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire is described as two ancient titans, Godzilla and Kong, clash in an epic battle as humans unravel their intertwined origins and connection to Skull Island's mysteries. This is the fifth movie in the Monarch MonsterVerse. It started with Godzilla 2014, followed up by Kong Skull Island, and then Godzilla King of the Monsters, and then Godzilla vs. Kong. This is the director Adam Wingard's second movie in the franchise following Godzilla vs. Kong in 2021. Godzilla x Kong stars mostly, the main characters are mostly returning cast members from Godzilla v. Kong, including Rebecca Hall, Brian Tyree Henry, and Kaylee Hoddle. The main new joiner is Dan Stevens, and again, as I noted in the opening, he formerly collaborated with Adam Wingard on the hit indie film The Guest that was sort of like Wingard's breakout film. Now, Chad mentioned that we're going to get more of these. Well, on its opening weekend, which was the Easter 2024 weekend, Godzilla x Kong grossed $80 million domestically in the U.S. and $114 million internationally, making it the second biggest debut for the franchise. Also, domestically, the second biggest opening of the year in the U.S., and I'm pretty sure the biggest opening of the year worldwide, if you combine everything. So, Big hit. Big ol' Godzilla-sized hit. With that said, what did we think of this movie? And Caleb Haldane, you were with us in Godzilla v. Kong a few years ago. And you are, I would argue, one of the world's leading Godzilla experts, or at least
probably not.
Maybe my within my world, one of the Godzilla experts. What are your overall thoughts on Godzilla x Kong?
Oh, man, I feel like there was a movie in there somewhere that somehow got lost on the editing floor or something, because I feel like they just kind of lose themselves, and a lot of the plot lines don't make a lot of sense. And I wonder if this was like one story was written, they started shooting, and then they started changing things, and then in the editing room they had to fix all of the things that changed along the way, because it felt really disjointed to me. And I just didn't see, I saw things that could have been that were greater than the thing that I was watching in the moment.
That is always one of the worst curses of blockbusters, when you're watching it and you're like, there's a movie here.
Yeah.
I can see where it's at, but they just don't make that movie.
It's just not the movie I'm watching. Yeah.
Yes. So disappointed
overall. I think it is a blockbuster. It's got a lot of action, and if you just want to turn off and watch something, it's going to fire some neurons. But it doesn't have a plot that holds together very well, and just a lot of choices that I feel like were kind of sins from the first one that we allowed to be, like, they just doubled down on now. So like taking that girl to Everywhere Dangerous, that was like a very big sin of the first one, but it was like because they had no other choices. It like they at least tried to pretend that. This time it's just like, no, let's just make her.
They even like acknowledge it. They're like, oh no, you shouldn't go. Right. And then the girl's like, but I wanna. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah.
And it was completely unnecessary too, because I feel like we could have adopted a whole different take on this. Like, what if traveling back and forth was just not dangerous? Like, they just do it all the time now. That changes like almost nothing story-wise, but makes a whole lot more sense why you have the cast and crew you have if this isn't supposed to be threatening, right? And then you just push off some scenes to the second act, and all of a sudden this movie's way more coherent.
Yeah. We should contextualize too. We haven't mentioned this yet. Godzilla vs. Kong came out in our darkest hour as a film-going audience. This was April 2021, I think.
Yeah.
So we had it had been a full year of the pandemic. Theaters had basically been closed. We gotten hardly any outside of Tenet, which no one went and saw in the theater for obvious reasons. We had not had a movie in the theater that was like a big blockbuster. So you're talking about, I think collectively, because if you look at the Rotten Tomatoes score, you see it too. Collectively, we gave that movie a lot of grace that I don't think it would have gotten had it been released today. Hence where we get with Godzilla x Kong, which in my opinion, which I'll share in a moment, is pretty consistent with the last movie.
Yeah.
That said, Chad Parizman, what did you think of the film?
I love this. Look, there's a reason that I want to come on for these movies. It gave me all of the same feels as Jurassic World Dominion, and I mean that in a positive way.
Yeah. Oh no. He evoked that movie.
It gave me everything I want. Like, it gave me what was on the movie poster. It absolutely delivered on what I expected, right? Give me a reason on why these two have to team up. Give me some cool extra bits of like why they are more powerful now than they were in the last movie. And I am absolutely happy. I actually think I totally get what you're saying, Caleb. I think that actually is, having just rewatched all of these, I think that's actually a bigger sin in some of these other ones. Like in King of the Monsters and in the last one, like there are so many plots and like things that go nowhere and things that make, right, like, oh, we got to get them to Hong Kong, and it's like a podcaster and a girl, and nobody notices it from this $1 trillion company. Like, there are so many things that don't make sense that I feel like were cobbled together. I don't know. I didn't get that as much in this one because they were just like, we're gonna stick with one group of people this time. We're not gonna send all them, all over the world. We'll send the monsters all over the world, but they'll kind of stay. And once again, the only reason that people are there are for exposition. Like they're there. That's why, right? So maybe there were some things that they fixed because there's a lot of VO. There's like a lot of of monster shots where we just have Rebecca Hall explaining what's going on in case we're not sure really why it is what it is. But yeah, for me, like, this delivered on what my expectation was.
Well said. We've got a champion in the room. And with that said, Laron Chapman, are you going to be another champion?
I'm not going to be a champion, but I'm not going to be too much of a hater. I will say that I think that this was a really loud and really stupid movie. But that being said, it's not any either of those things in a clever, self-knowing sort of way. It's in an inoffensive, mostly entertaining sort of way, And I think obviously it's a far cry from the quality and the emotional power of just last year's Godzilla -1. But obviously these are different movies and different tones. But also, as Chad said, I think like this movie does what it says, what the picture on the box promises, and audiences' mileage with this, I think, is going to depend on how willing they are, as Caleb Squared said, as willing as they are to turn their brains off to watch this kind of live action cartoon. So I can't fault it for being what it is, like I think it sets out to entertain, and I guess on that base level, expectation, it's satisfied. But yeah, as a movie, I thought it was pretty dumb.
I'm going to both agree and disagree with you, Chad. Number one, I'm sorry. This movie is so much better than Jurassic World Dominion. And that movie is just that movie promised something, and they're like, but what if we follow giant locusts instead?
We didn't get bugs. Like, it wasn't like a bunch of bugs came out of Hollow Earth and like that. I agree with you on that. I'm not saying it's the same movie. It gave me the same feels though.
Yeah. Okay. To be fair. Okay. Fair. And also, you're totally justified to feel that way. We're all allowed to feel how we feel. And for all of Chad, you and Brock Lay, my friend who was on the show, also liked that movie. So for all of you guys who loved that thing, I'm happy for you. So I disagree with you fundamentally on that part. But this movie, like you said, on the poster, this delivers exactly what it says it's going to be. You're going to see them team up. It's going to be big, dumb, and loud. I do think there was a point in this universe where the humans actually had some agency and served a real purpose. And that's just diminished with each and every one of these movies that the longer this little series has gone on. That's a little bit of a bummer, but you're not really going to this movie looking for that. It's just a nice bonus when it's there.
Especially when you have people like Rebecca Hall, a great actress, and then you have Academy Award nominee Brian Tyree Henry. It just feels like these are actors, and they're given very little to do in the way of
what that's called?
Acting.
You know what that's called, Laron? That's called the yacht money. Okay.
Hey,
you're in Hollywood, you gotta have that fancy sports car.
I've done a couple of Lifetime movies, so I get it.
I don't blame them.
We pay the bills.
The most important part to me is that I had a fun time though. I really did. I thought the spectacle in this was ridiculously stupid. I think this is a big, dumb Saturday morning cartoon through and through. It's actually part of the reason I like the Fast and Furious franchise. Now, that franchise, I like the soapier elements that we get with those human characters. That we don't really see that here, but what this does deliver on is big dumb spectacle setups that don't make any sense. But you're like, oh, that's so cool, and the humans are really just there to connect the dots in the most simple way. It doesn't even make logical sense 99% of the time. Dan Stevens is here going ham, and I love it. It's fun. I'm glad he's here doing something super silly. That's all I can ask for from this movie. It's a disappointment for the franchise as a whole that I feel like this is what it's sort of devolved into, which is just big dumb spectacle. When I do think I haven't watched Monarch, but I've heard it's actually got a lot of great character stuff in it.
We can talk about that later.
Oh, yeah, please do. I wish these movies were more, but I also am accepting that they're not. And for what they're promising, and at least in the marketing, I feel like they're delivering on that super well. So it's a fun time for me. So I had a good time. The Dolby Cinema. Wow, what an experience. My adrenaline was rushing. I couldn't sleep that night. So much
felt
noise.
Every punch.
How would you guys compare it to the MonsterVerse? Like in terms of the other movies? I know, Caleb, you and I have talked about this in the past a couple of times. Chad, I know you've seen Monarch. So I'll start with you, Caleb, and then I want to get to Chad. Have you watched Monarch, Caleb?
I have not watched Monarch.
Okay.
But like, as far as the MonsterVerse goes, my favorite is still the King of Monsters. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah. That one is probably the least enjoyable one to watch if you don't have a lot of lore behind you, but
Yeah,
it is
'cause
so fan servicey. It is like so Godzilla fan servicey that I couldn't help but just be cheesing the entire time I was watching
I love it. That's a good one. I recall specifically hating that movie, and you were like, "No, man, you just don't get it." And I was like, "What?" And because I was ready. I'm like, "Let's go!" All the spectacle, all the monsters, the trailers were amazing. The poster was great, and I got in, and I'm like, "What the hell?" And then there's like Caleb's like, "It's the greatest American Godzilla ever made," you know?
Yeah, yeah. I still feel that way. I still like. It wasn't just the new movie high where I walked out of the theater and was loving it. It is still my favorite of the new MonsterVerse. It really does just tap a lot of that old Godzilla, you know, from the Heisei to like all the way to 80s Godzilla. Like it just, that era was so campy and so much about like displaying those monsters in like frame, you know, where we've gotten even this movie, it's not about like capturing them in frame. It's all like it's the tight shot. It's the like, let's the 3/4 shot and a lot of those shots, which, you know, I think is more, you know, representative of the time. But when I was watching King of Monsters and they would do those pullback shots and just like you get to see the entire battle, just made me think of like there could be rubber, or you know, this could be rubber suits, like this could be happening right now. But yeah, I love that one, and it's still probably my favorite. But I do think that this one, while I think there could have been a great movie here, ends up being an okay movie. Like it is not the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's certainly not, you know, not to diminish it and saying it's a big dumb Saturday morning cartoon. That's in my mind, that's a compliment, you know.
Yeah. Like and that's,
it's not like a Michael Bay Transformers movie, for example.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just like totally hard, impossible to follow, and so
it's not convoluted.
No. Chad, how would you compare this to the previous entries of the MonsterVerse?
I mean, I'm with you on King of the Monsters having some of like the best battles, right? I think you're absolutely right, but because they just throw like, oh, it's Mothra, oh, it's Rodan, oh, it's King Ghidorah, oh, it's right, like, and then they introduce like, oh, he's actually an alien. He's a, you know, like there was some awesome stuff in there, but the whole like Echo tourist, like Papa Lannister shows up and is like, no, we should burn it all to the ground because humans are horrible.
I do have a theory about him that if they end up making true is going to change everyone's perspective on him. What if he's just from Planet X?
Okay, spoiler discussion. Yes, I have. That's where we gotta go. That's all I'm saying.
If they bring that in, so for people who don't know, Planet X is this like, it's actually more classical sci-fi than it is purely Godzilla, but it's like, what if there is an opposite Earth on the other side of the sun and we are always tracking completely opposite? It will never be able to see it because it'll always be completely opposite to us. Well, in the Godzilla universe, especially in the original series, they said, that it exists, and that's where Ghidorah comes from. So there's a race of people that live there too. So if he's from there and he's actually just trying to cause chaos and sow chaos, then all of a sudden his plan makes a little more sense. Like his eco-terrorism makes no sense as is, but if he's from Planet X and he's actually just here to cause chaos and hope to give King Ghidorah a leg up, it actually worked.
So you think it actually basically is the same plot as Destroy All Monsters, where like they're like just trying to convince us, and he was their emissary.
Yes, I mean, that's what I'm hoping for. If they pull that off,
if we get like a Fast and Furious style retcon where like it turns out, there's a bunch
there's not even that much you have to retcon because of how wacky and stupid his plot is. It's like it would way more easily work with the from a certain point of view type of rationale, because it's like from his current point of view it doesn't work, so like it has to be another point of view, right?
Well, it has to be a joke or a distraction. I mean, I think, you're missing Fast and Furious, Chad. But I mean, we are due for, at this point, we'll talk about more in spoilers about where we think this thing's going to go. But I mean, we're kind of due for a shakeup in the franchise. And I think Aliens or people from Planet X is exactly, that's where you go.
Not,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Yes. Well, let's dig into that later. Because
That later.
Like, the Hollow, yeah. Let's go there. I will say, like, so I mean, I think I probably put this closer to the top of all of them. I mean, it's hard to Monarch Legacy of Monsters is fantastic. And like, but right, it's a 10-hour series or 8-hour, whatever it is, right? So they obviously have a lot more time. They probably had a little bit more money from Apple. It introduced it. Laron, did you watch this series yet? Or am I the only one?
No.
Okay. So like we won't get into it. There's a whole bunch of stuff that it actually introduces that like may or may not line up with like what's actually going on in the movie franchise. Did any of y'all mess with the animated Skull Island on Netflix well?
I did not.
I watched it. Yeah.
How is it?
It's pretty good.
It's fun. Like,
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
yeah, it's that same. I mean, I think it's from that same company that does a lot of the Netflix animated shows. So like, it's fun. Again, it's got a bunch of other monsters. It's a fairly self-contained story, but like, I continue to be surprised that this MonsterVerse and Legendary has been able to like move this around where like this is being distributed through Warner Brothers. Then it's got a show on Apple TV. Then it has another show on Netflix. Like, I don't know how they're able to pull that off, but like, kudos to them to finding anyone that's willing to write a check. And I guess that's like the benefit of Legendary being independent at this point and not being owned by someone, that they can do all of these things. But you know, I would put this probably, I still think the first Godzilla is probably like, that one's, for having watched that, is pretty fantastic. And like, there's some amazing stuff going on with like the camera work and the, like, that feels like a much better actual story to me, and probably the best human story that's been told in this set of movies.
I need to check out Monarch, clearly, and the King Kong show.
We both do.
Yeah, it's I mean, you got to watch the Kurt Russell Wyatt Russell team up too, right? Yeah, no, Chad, I'm glad you point that out about the franchise overall. It's kind of wild that this is still a thing, honestly. When you look it out, because they obviously didn't plan to, when they set up make Godzilla 2014. I think they had like rough ambitions to have a crossover with King Kong, because King Kong didn't even come out until, or Kong Skull Island rather, didn't even come out for like another 3 or 4 years after that movie. I think it was 2017. And they've somehow made it work and sustain, which is bizarre, because every time I watched one, even Godzilla King of Monsters, which did not do very well critically or at the box office, I was like, I just don't know if this has got the gas in the tank. But then Godzilla v Kong comes out and is a smash hit. The Apple TV show, truly bizarre. I love it. But yeah, you're speaking of the human characters, though. I do think that's a crucial element that is not consistent in all the movies, but at the end of the day, I think makes the more memorable stories stick out for sure. Laron?
Yeah.
What did you think? How would you compare this to the MonsterVerse?
You know, I feel like this one, you know, what I did admire about this one is how streamlined it did feel. It does kind of just get right to the point. That's both like a feature and a bug, though, because it does feel like it's so thin that there's like, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, there's not much meat on its bones in the way of narrative. But as far as just like for like a viewing experience, at least it just keeps going, you know, and it keeps going. Like, the train is moving, you know, like I wasn't bored, you know what I mean? Like, so I mean, I think they trimmed a lot of the fat here, you know, in ways that are more convoluted with some of the other entries, I felt. But
yeah, no, I'd agree with you. I think that's what, for me, puts this one over Godzilla versus Kong, even though that movie's probably always going to have a little larger staying power in my mind, just because it came out at such a weird time and theater going, and it was kind of like movies are back for the first time in like over a year. And obviously the hype of Godzilla and Kong actually fighting on the big screen was pretty enticing. But as a movie, this movie's way more streamlined than that movie. They do remove some of the human drama, but frankly, that wasn't exactly the strong suit of that movie either.
that's true.
So at least they figured out what worked. But I still don't think it quite reaches the heights of either the eccentric characters we see in Kong Skull Island, which is my favorite one, or the really heartfelt character story that I feel like we see in Godzilla 2014, which, in my opinion, is probably one of the stronger entries.
They did retain one of the best pieces of Godzilla versus Kong, though, which is the podcast storyline.
Yes. Podcasters continue to be validated on the big screen.
Yes.
We love a shout out, no matter what movie it falls in.
Yeah.
You know, conspiracy theory podcast. Okay, I do have to say, I'm sorry, guys. Brian Tyrese Henry's bit did not work for me in this movie. I think it worked the first time for like a second.
Agreed.
And then after that, it just, every time they made a joke, I was like, this is
I feel like it was the writing this time because he's great. And I agree with you. Like all his line deliveries felt flat this time. It just felt like,
Also, like he doesn't do anything.
Mm-mm.
Like,
no.
You take him out of this movie, and this movie is the same movie.
Yes.
So I didn't see it. It's one of the things that I like point to when I think of like this. There's a movie here, but they didn't quite connect the dots properly, because I think it would have been nice to really actually rope him in a meaningful way into this movie, but it just doesn't really.
Should have given half of Rebecca Hall's monologues to him so he could have something of substance to say.
Him doing the exposition as a podcaster actually made more sense. Like he's doing it audio narration or doing it for the camera. He's describing what's going on, or if it's an audio pod, you know what I mean? You can make that work, but instead he's just there for comedic relief, I think. And I don't even think he's that funny. Frankly, Dan Stevens is the comedic relief
in this, for sure. For sure.
All right. Well, I have a very important question before letter grades, but first let's rank the MonsterVerse. And Chad, I know this is very fresh for you, sort of fresh for me, but again, totally was not close watching these, especially Godzilla v Kong. How would you rank the MonsterVerse so far?
So I put taking the TV shows out, I put Godzilla 2014 as number one. I probably put this as number two. I put Skull Island 3, Godzilla versus Kong 4, and King of the Monsters 5.
All right. Caleb Haldane, are you taking offense to this ranking?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, way to put Caleb Haldane's number one movie at number 5,
yeah.
Chad. I mean, come on.
You know, I'm here for good content. So yeah.
So Caleb, what's your retort? How would you rank the movies that you've seen so far?
It's his list, but flipped. No, no, like I do. Yeah, King of Monsters is at the top, but then his list is pretty well falls in line. I don't know. I feel like this movie actually is a little further down. I wouldn't put it so high, but 2014 was good. I really enjoyed it. This movie, it ends up down near the bottom only because they're all passing grades.
Yeah.
So it gets so jumbled at the bottom that I don't even know if I care to even put them in an order. It's just kind of like my favorite because of fan service, then, 2014 because of how it kicked it off and it kicked it off properly. And then the rest just kind of sit there in any way. I would not flip the channel on any of them.
Okay. All right. So all pretty, so I think that's, honestly, I had a difficult time putting my list together for that very reason. There's the 2 that I know I really like, and then there's the other 3 that I'm like, you could take or leave any 3 of them. Laron Chapman, how would you rank yours?
So Kong Skull Island is also my favorite. I had a lot of fun with Godzilla v Kong, so I had that as second. I have the 2014 Godzilla as third. What I do think that one gets right, it's kind of, I've cooled on it over the years, but I think that it's the most menacing. Tonally of these. They've gotten sillier and a little flimsier as it's gone along, but that one actually genuinely has some tension and some,
when you feel the human suffering behind all the battles and the destruction and the fear the average person has. And by this movie, it's literally an insurance joke.
Exactly. Yeah. So the human component of that is much stronger than the other films, I feel like. It has other issues, but that is one aspect that I think is really strong. And then it would be this one, Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire, and then unfortunately, yes, I also have Godzilla King of the Monsters as last as well. I also have a good time with that one. It's just it's a ride. I'll give you that. It's an amusement park ride, much like kind of similar to this one. So
Sorry, Caleb. I'm Haldane. I'm
all
sorry.
piling on.
I mean, I agree with you that the bottom three are all in my mind kind of like, I think they're all pretty good. They're all pretty fine. I didn't say good. They're pretty fine.
Yeah.
They're pretty okay. My number one is Kong Skull Island. Again, I think the biggest thing I like about that is that's by far the best cast. When you go back and watch it, it's like, how did they get all of these actors like at the peak of their fame? I mean, that was right before Brie Larson, or no, it was right after Brie Larson.
Right after, yeah.
She won the Oscar. You have Tom Hiddleston right after he's coming off of Loki. I mean, it's John Goodman. It's insane. Like that's just a stat cast.
Yeah. And the effects are a lot better. I feel like in that one, much more. I don't know, sharpened, saturated.
It's before the whole VFX industry spun out of control that we're seeing today, and people burned out. But no, I thought the VFX in that were good, and it just really captured the period in a fun, pulpy sort of way. It just, for whatever reason, that movie really clicks for me. I wouldn't say it's the most emotionally deep. I think that really is 2014's Godzilla. But in terms of the one that I have the most fun, the one the most likely to just turn on and watch, and I have done a few times, is Kong Skull Island. Then Godzilla 2014, not to repeat what you said, Laron, I think you nailed it. They also treated Godzilla like Jaws, so it was a great reveal movie where it's like, when's he going to show up? And then you really have to wait until the last act before you really see Godzilla and all of his terror just like fight it. But we see he's actually there to protect the humans, right? So then after that I have all pretty close. I think I have Godzilla X Kong at number 3 because I like the streamlined nature of it more than V Kong. And then you have V Kong, and then you have Godzilla King of the Monsters. But Caleb Haldane, in the movie's defense, we're
just gonna keep apologizing.
After talking with you and debating with you for hours, and then eventually rewatching the movie, I came to terms with the fact that it's not as bad as I thought when I watched it the first time.
It's already moved up in my mind based on your love of it.
And if they Tokyo drift this, like it moves up. It moves up substantially if we get it.
No, for real.
It's got some hooks and knobs that you could really tweak that I don't know the rest of the universe is actually given. And so I'm excited to see it. But I do admit that because of that, it is harder for someone who's not like trying to anticipate those storylines to really enjoy it, because it does come off as just like, this doesn't, like, your plot makes no sense. But if you're like, well, what if the plot is the subversion?
I think Chad's onto something, though. There's a chance, we have a ripe chance to Tokyo drift this, and all of a sudden Tokyo Drift's a good movie now. Why? Because they made it make sense somehow. It's incredible. Yeah. Okay, guys, before letter grades and recommendations, what does the new Empire mean? I need to know. Frozen Empire from Ghostbusters, I get it. There's a ice ghost monster thing. Okay. New York freezes.
I mean, the new Empire? There's an ice monster here too.
There is an ice monster here. It could be Frozen Empire. In fact, maybe it was at some point, right? An ice monster that was going to freeze the planet.
Yeah. Has in the past.
Yes.
I think that's spoiler territory. Like, I feel like there's a definitive answer.
Okay.
But I don't know that we want to actually answer.
No.
Well,
not if it's spoiled.
I guess I would pose this. Is the new Empire where we start or where we end? Because I think you can take it in either way. Like, you could definitely take it as like where Godzilla v Kong ends, which is Godzilla rules above, Kong rules below. That's the new Empire. Or
so I think it has all to do with Hollow Earth, and it has to do with where V Kong was. He had no empire. Now he has an empire.
Okay. Well, I mean,
that's
you
what
think
the new
it's
empire
Kong's empire.
It's Kong's empire, and only that's the only thing they're alluding to.
Okay, that was my big question. I think, and that was a great discussion, guys. Way to figure it out, because the title is so vague. It's like, who are they talking about? Because it could be the bad guys or the empire of the new bad guys or whatever. But we'll talk about it in spoilers.
I was so distracted by the X. I didn't get that. I didn't even know how to say it, so I didn't even get that far.
Right,
so.
and there's no colon. You're just like, is this credits? I'm not reading it.
I can't wait until the next one has rises in the title. I'm sure.
Revenge.
Right, what letter grade?
Right, we need like
revenge. Revenge of Kong. Revenge of Godzilla X Kong. Dominion. Part 2. What letter grade would we give Godzilla X Kong? Laron, Chapman, I'll start with you.
I mean, I give this a C+. It's serviceable, it's entertaining, but ultimately for me, it is very forgettable, and that's my biggest issue with it. And that's the biggest issue with anything I think that just focuses so heavily on the spectacle, and there's not really a story or a character to hang on to. Is that it's fun for that moment, but it's like cotton candy. It tastes good, but then it melts in your mouth and then it's gone. Like so. That's kind of how I feel about it. It's it's a good one-time watch, where some of these others I might actually revisit.
All right, well, Laron Chapman, well said. Caleb Haldane, what letter grade would you give the film?
I'm right at that C+ as well. I feel, again, that this movie is watchable, it's serviceable, but I just couldn't shake the fact that it's like, when I'm saying, well, I would have done this different while sitting in your theater, you got some cleanup to do on that movie. You didn't think some things through. I shouldn't be stuck thinking about, well, this plot would have made so much more sense if this.
Yeah.
And I found myself doing that a few times.
Yeah, I do hear that. There's so many times I find that I do that myself way more in blockbuster movies, and it's never good because at that point you're out of the movie. You're not thinking about the movie. You're thinking about, oh, you could have done this, or why are you doing it this way? C+ though, still good.
Yeah,
C+.
still C+. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Chad Parizman.
I'm going B-, just a little bit above, where you all are. Yes, I probably could rip this apart and like some of the internal logic, but why? Like it's not. It doesn't need to be. It is what it is. I had fun. I saw this with 15 other people in the movie theater on the first showing of the day. So I'll go a little bit more. As I told my wife earlier, I can't wait 3 years from now to watch this on a Sunday afternoon on TBS with her, because that'll be the only time that she watches
Yes.
Watch it.
That's a great way to put it. This is the perfect Sunday afternoon TBS TNT Sci-Fi Channel movie where you're probably not going to stop and make time to watch it, but it's on. You're flipping the channels and you're like, yeah.
I also still pay for cable, so like there's a good chance that happens.
So it's a legitimate possibility.
Yes.
I'm also going to go C+, not to reiterate. I think you guys have all said it so well, but it gave me exactly what I expected. Do I wish it was more? Do I believe it could be more? Yes. See also Godzilla -1. But the movie's really not promising that thing. It's promising something much more simplified, much more lizard brain. It's tapping my lizard brain for just spectacle, and it nails that. So I can't be too mad at it for not being the thing I want it to be, when it does just fine at being what it says it's going to be. That said, I'm excited about alternate media recommendations this week. So, listeners, we always recommend alternate movies, television shows, novels, music, or video games, any other media that's related in any way to Godzilla x Kong. So I'll start with you, Caleb Haldane. What alternate media recommendation would you make?
Do we do this before the spoilers?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I've always thought we did it. Sorry. Alternate media that I would recommend. That's a tough one with this one in particular, because I feel like you want to stay in the MonsterVerse, but I feel like it doesn't do you much to actually stay in the Monarch universe this time. And I would say that this does kind of harken back to some of the earlier Godzillas, with like Godzilla vs. Mothra is a clear example for me of what this one taps into a bit. But also like maybe venture a little like tangentially to like the Gamora films. I feel like those are really underserviced, and I feel like they could be the next incorporation in the Monarch, because Legendary now does does now have the American rights for Gamora as well.
Ooh.
So it's possible.
And like we said, this movie made a lot of money, so it's on the table.
We're getting another movie, whatever it is. It's gonna be.
Chad Parizman, what would you recommend?
I mean, I think if we stick kaiju, like go rewatch Cloverfield, right? Very different take. It's another more like the first Godzilla. We don't really see the monster. We don't fully understand anything about it. I still love that film. well, maybe we'll get to this in spoilers, but go check out some Dragon Ball movies. I think if you dig this, you'll dig some Dragon Ball. And then I was trying to think of like, do you go watch like San Andreas or Armageddon? Like there's got to be like just go watch some like Earth destruction movies, because like
disaster movies.
Disaster movies in general, because like that's a piece that we actually get a lot more of it in this film, which like I still don't understand why people live like in all of these types of movies. Like, why are people still living in Hong Kong? Like, who's taking a beach vacation? When like I understand it in the first movie, maybe in the second one, Godzilla's been around for 15 years. Like, why is anyone still populating islands? Or like, you guys should be having like, your homes should be worth triple the value of what they are today, because everyone should be moving to the Midwest and the Dakotas and Colorado to get away from any potential body of water.
Yes.
And who's the madman still living in a high rise?
Yeah.
Oh man, for real.
Right.
All single family residence homes, guys. Come on.
Yeah, none of that makes sense anymore. I don't care how much gargantuan insurance you've bought with your code podcast, to get it on your home. I'm just surprised that any of these places are standing 15 years later. So I think just like another popcorn, disaster flick would be another place to just spend some time after this.
You don't actually see the Earth being destroyed, but my go-to is Armageddon. Is a fun one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think what's another good? I mean,
if you want to go for Frozen Empires, then let's do The Day After Tomorrow.
Oh, that's a fun one. Love that. Yes. You can also do Independence Day. Also,
Deep Impact.
Basically, any movie by Roland Emmerich at this point. Yeah. Even Moonfall. Yeah, just throw Moonfall.
Yes, if you want to believe that you can walk from Philadelphia to New York City in like a day, definitely go check that out.
All right, Laron, Chapman, what are your picks?
So speaking of Roland Emmerich, I'm going to recommend the 1998 Godzilla, and I'll tell you why. So that it's a lot
of fish, Laron.
If you want this film to move up a little higher in your mind, check out that one, because guys, it can always be worse. So, but a serious recommendation. I'm going to go with Bong Joon-ho's The Host. It's probably too high class to compare to this one, but also a monster flick that has a lot of deeper implications, and I think that's one that people will actually enjoy. Tangentially related to this. So,
anytime you can watch Bong Joon-ho, you're in good spirits. And you got to watch all of them this year, because we found out sadly that Mickey 17, his new film, his first one since winning the Oscar for Parasite, has been pushed to next year. So
is that official?
We're not even going to survive the year.
Wait, is that officially has a date, or it just got delisted?
It got delisted, and I want to say, I need to verify this. I want to say that they decided they were going to premiere it at a film festival next year in 2025. I'm going to mention, Chad, you mentioned anime. I think Dragon Ball Z. I mean, we won't spoil it, but there's a lot of Dragon Ball Z isms in this movie, a lot of them. But let's go pivot differently. My personal favorite, if we're going for children's kaiju anime, naturally got to go Digimon Digital Monsters, the superior of the Mon animes. I will die on that hill. Pokemon fans, fight me. Yeah, because it's just monsters powering up and leveling up and then fighting each other. And there happens to be a bunch of soapy, quirky human drama in the foreground. And I kind of like that. I kind of would have liked a little more of that kind of human drama in the foreground of this movie too. But, it's got spectacle. Also, bringing it back, not related to kaiju anyway, but it is a Saturday morning cartoon. I liken this to Saturday morning cartoons. I already said it. X-Men 97, guys. It's on right now. It delivers the goods if you were a fan of that very specific 90s X-Men animated series, they understood what the sauce was, and they've made it with modern animation, and the spectacle is so much cooler. Check that out on Disney Plus. I promise. I wish they were sponsoring me, but they are not. It's a great show. And lastly, if I am going to go the kaiju route, 2017's Colossal, starring Anne Hathaway, I thought was a really, really clever take on that genre, one that I'd never seen before, that I checked today, made like $1.5 million, meaning no one saw that movie.
It's a criminally underseen movie. I agree.
Totally. Check that out. Colossal. All right, listeners, with that said, if you don't want to be spoiled on Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire, go ahead and tune out now.
Run! It's Godzilla! It looks like Godzilla, but due to international copyright laws, it's not. Still, we should run like it is Godzilla! Though it isn't.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to start off by just diving into Saturday morning cartoon or weightless spectacle. Where is the line?
Mm-hmm.
Because Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire, more or less is designed to put these titans together to fight almost exclusively in CG, fight other creatures this time instead of each other. Looking back on the evolution of this franchise, we've already talked about in the show, they've become less and less character focused and more focused on the spectacle elements. So I thought it might be worthwhile to really dissect and debate the merits of this approach. And here's an example, right? So I want to talk about first, the merits and drawbacks to sort of doing this simplified approach. So here's a couple of examples of movies I think that did this really, really well. And what I'm talking about is taking more character-driven stories and simplifying them into a formula that is more blockbustery. We've already said the Fast and Furious franchise. I think Fast 5 does a great job at that. Yeah, it's a soap opera. It's silly, but you really believe in the characters. You're invested in the dynamics, and they're fun to watch. Avengers 2012, I know we're all MCU fatigued, but when that movie came out at the time, it was a big deal, and it was a huge team-up crossover, 5 different characters from 4 previous movies. It was a big deal. They simplified the characters and made it really work really effectively. Still a great film. Where I'd also say 2014's Pacific Rim from Guillermo del Toro, another kaiju movie that also... Yeah, it's all about the spectacle, but you really are invested in the human characters and their arcs they're having in the film. Done wrong, you get films like Michael Bay's Transformers. I guess I want to get you guys' take, though, in terms of, A, how well do you think this film does that simplifying approach? And B, where's that line, in terms of, hey, this is dumb fun versus, I don't even care anymore.
Well, I feel like the merits to this is that it does satisfy the audience that just wants to go for 2 hours of creature feature action violence. And obviously you get these large box office numbers with doing so. You don't have to go dig too deep into the lore. But I do think the drawback is that it weakens the overall impact, I think, of the franchise by making these kind of cash grabby films that again have little, if nothing, to say in the way of like social commentary, and which I think is when these things are more interesting, when they incorporate those elements into it, when the monsters mean something more than crash, crash, boom, boom, like they mean something or they stand in for something more interesting, which we get none of that here. So I think, yeah, if you just want a TV dinner or, like a old faithful McDonald's.
The iconography of King Kong riding on the back of Godzilla in a zero gravity environment, that didn't mean something to you, Laron?
That moment notwithstanding, yes, that was a moment. That's part of the dumb spectacle that did work for me here. It's like, I did need to see that, so.
I'm actually going to completely echo Laurent here with, I think that because the monsters don't have any kind of analog, and because we don't leverage the human story, this one will be very forgettable. Like a year from now, we'll have a hard time remembering what this plot was, because while it might nail the action very well and it has some really cool action, it doesn't earn it. It doesn't get us there through anything that can anchor us in some sort of touchstone. There's going to be no anchoring points along this entire movie where we go, oh yeah, that was so iconic of its time or something. And I think that's, again, what could have happened here. I really feel like the podcaster should have hated Monarch. Like he goes from an underground darling to somebody who does it. And then now where we see him, nobody believes him anymore. He has now been turned into a false prophet, right? He should vilify Monarch. He should hate them. His part in this story should have been some sort of ability to get back into the public eye in a positive manner. But that's not really what we get out of him. We just get he thinks outside of the box and that's why he's here. And that's just not a good enough reason, like, and it could have been very compelling, and this could say something about our current political climate, right? Like, if you take the culture we're in, which is just this super heated hot pot, and you put someone through the ringer, how can they have a redemption? How can they leave from the society turning on them to getting back into the social graces? I think that could have been very cool, and it could have been very relevant, and we don't get any of that.
Or even like if you explore the idea of, podcasters versus, sort of the InfoWars misinformation podcaster sort of thing, which would be very relevant for today's standards.
Yeah,
that is a great point.
There's probably there's a storyline there of like right, we get that a little bit with where he wants to like film the Iwi people, right? There's a plot line of like protecting native cultures, and I feel like, to your point,
it's
like
just dropped. Yeah.
The problem is like you can't introduce that an hour into a big old dump fest, right? Like then people pan the movie and are like, this makes no sense, right? So like they had to kind of commit, but there probably is a much better version of, like, why did her tribe leave to go up to Skull Island, and like what are they really protecting? And they're right, like there's probably a bunch of cool stuff that you can do around that, other than the bromance that is like brewing there, and then being like, put the camera away. Like, we've seen what happens when we expose cultures to the outside, and what will, like, do we really want people coming here? Again, I don't know how they get there unless they steal one of those giant like $1 million machines, because we don't have a way to just hop on a plane to Hollow Earth anymore. But outside of that, there is a version where like there's something to say here.
And that's kind of what I was saying. Like, what if you just made Hollow Earth travel trivial now, right? And so now they're going down to repair this bruised ego of a podcaster. They feel like they owe him because they did him dirty. And this is going to be his redemption arc. The base one doesn't get attacked yet. Instead, we get more of a Jurassic Park feel, where it's like it gets attacked while they're there. And we get to witness the destruction through the lens of our protagonists rather than through the lens of cameras, right?
Yeah. And again, you can build on that of like, how do we protect Hollow Earth from the mistakes that we made above, right? Like there's an eco storyline there that again is not, we've destroyed the Earth, so let's burn it all to the ground like we got in the last one. There is something else about like,
but our own ignorance can play into that, right?
Yes.
So like, it's not about burning it down, like you say. It's about, again, getting this false sense of confidence that like any area we can tame, and we've already felt that way about this amazingly complicated, new, dangerous place. We already feel like we've tamed it. That would have been, again, another commentary that we lose.
Yeah. And you actually do Jurassic Park inside of King Kong, which would be pretty cool. I hear what you're saying, Caleb, but did you see how Godzilla smashed through, or Kong smashed through the pyramid? One of the wonders of the world just destroyed in that fight. Wasn't that cool?
I haven't seen a fight that makes as much sense since Moon Knight, destroyed the pyramids.
Just why did Godzilla have to jump off the Rock of Gibraltar? That's not close. And also, why is like Cairo on top of Giza now? Because they're in Giza, yet we're seeing all of this mayhem in Cairo. It's like they're not that close.
Godzilla and Kong, basically backyard. Basically backyard. I don't know. Chad, anything else you want to add about sort of the drawbacks or how this movie successfully or not does it? I tend to agree with Caleb. I think the one thing for me missing here is it would have been nice to have a little bit of something. Like I'm saying, it doesn't even have to be like super thoughtful.
Yeah.
It just needs to be tangible. And again, make it the soap opera. Make it silly. It fits in with the vibe. And that really leans into a lot of Saturday morning cartoons, honestly. And we didn't really get that. It really is just, well, Dan Stevens, he did pull that tooth out of Kong's mouth. Isn't that silly? Isn't that funny? And you're like, yeah, it is. And he's kind of a silly character, but we don't know anything about him.
Right.
We don't know anything about any of these people, really.
It does feel like they've kind of bifurcated, right? Like the small storytelling is being done on the small screen. Like the human story in Monarch Legacy of Monsters is fantastic, I think. And then they were like, okay, well, if we're going to tell a human story, we'll do it there where it's humans with a little bit of kaiju. And then this was like kaiju with a little bit of humans. As we talk about like, where does it go? Like, is there an interest in a small story, right? And I think this is the same problem that we've talked, right? Star Wars, MCU, like any of these places where like, could you go and tell another Skull Island story, right? Because that movie, right, like takes place in one location. It's right, there's a reason that it's all, I don't know that there's an interest in telling a small story inside of the MonsterVerse outside of transmit, right? TV or a podcast or a comic book or whatever it is.
It's just, it's weird. I mean, I shouldn't say it's weird. It kind of makes sense, but it actually follows sort of and reflects sort of where we're at with media today anyway, which is, you get the smaller stuff that's a lot more character focused on TV, big screen, big dumb action. Yep. I don't like that. It feels so binary, especially when these are supposed to exist in the same continuity. It feels very disjointed. And I just don't understand
the need. Like, I've already kind of proposed some ways you tweak the current storyline and you get some of that depth.
Right.
It was definitely missing some depth. And even the Iwi people, like they're just kind of thrown into this movie. And I feel like maybe they were trying to do the twins thing. So Mothra is usually connected to these two twins, right? And so I was guessing they were going to bring this girl in and she was going to have a representative twin there, and they were going to do that. And it felt like they were doing that. And then all of a sudden it was just like, oh no, it's just her. And it's just like, it makes sense. Like, we split them up, Luke and Leia style. So we know we were protecting them.
Yeah.
And that, send one to Skull Island, one down here. And it just didn't make sense of what we were doing.
Did she travel inside of Mothra? I kind of, what was the implication there? Was there one? Like, was there any explanation offered of how she ended up back on Earth, like topside with Mothra and then back again?
No, but it was cool when Mothra showed up with that.
Like when Mothra was like, "Let me spit, and I'm going to close the secret morphing technology."
Listen, guys, that's how I sump that movie. Every time you have a question, you're like, but this cool thing's happening.
I'm with you as the one who like gave this a better grade than the three of you. I'm with you, but if we're gonna like inspect it, let's inspect it and like
100%. Yeah, 100%. No, totally. It wasn't very clear. I would say at best it's ambiguous. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I will say that whole reveal and all that played out. I don't know if it's a problem with the movie. It really was overwhelming though, and that especially in the last 30 minutes. They might have actually established that, Chad, but I was so overwhelmed by everything else going on that I didn't catch it.
Right. Yes. Same.
Well, in terms of what the humans do well, I mean, do they serve anything functionally that we want to call out here, or is it just a total waste of time?
It's not a total waste of time. I think the fact that they are grounding in a single location feels relatable, right? Like in other movies, they're world hopping, right? And that just doesn't feel relatable. The fact that we've ground to one kind of point and the travel is far more contained in this than in previous installments, I feel like that they do great. And I do think that it is more believable this time around by having that perspective that isn't just like, okay, well, we just need to go to the next place and the next place and the next place. And it doesn't, fail us in that same way like final season of Game of Thrones did, where it's just like, okay, well, let's just be here now. Let's just be here. I think that having the humans like really subject to their own environment in a way that we haven't had them in before was successful.
They successfully like split up the humans so they couldn't be everywhere all at the same time, which was very nice. And it actually made you more worried about Godzilla in general, because Godzilla is kind of like the wild card, really, because you don't know what Godzilla is going to do for most of the movie. You just know he's going to like power up for his Kamehameha for like an hour of the movie, you know? Like, I literally was watching the movie, I'm like, this is Dragon Ball Z. He's just powering up. That's what he's doing. But yeah, I mean, but the thing is, it did place a sense of urgent. I don't know if urgency is the right way, but suspense. You were like, I don't know how this other shoe is going to drop. I mean, what is Godzilla going to do before the big bads make it to the top? For sure. Laron, what did you think? I mean, did the humans?
I don't think that they don't serve any function in the story. It's just that I don't think they're fleshed out in a satisfactory way, and that's probably where the frustration comes from. It's like we could see where they could. Mm-hmm. They could be more useful here or more useful there, but they're relegated to becoming these like cheesy pun machines or the expedition dump, and that's disappointing because, like you said, you have the talent, you have the ability, and you even have some thin narrative threads that they could actually utilize them in, and they just kind of don't. And so, I don't think they lack function. They just lack depth.
No, I'm hearing you, and Chad, I want to throw it to you here on this part too, because I think generally speaking, what has made the whole interconnected universe such an enticing proposition for a lot of things, MCU being really one of the only super successful ones, this one honestly being another one of them, but is the investment in the characters and seeing them kind of butt up against each other and interact. This franchise weirdly hasn't done that. There is a lot of crossover movie to movie, but like there's none of the characters from either Kong Skull Island or Godzilla 2014 are here. You know, there's some characters that are in Godzilla King of Monsters and Godzilla v Kong that are not in this movie. It just seems kind of weird the way that the humans have been they're kind of disposable. I mean,
they were interchangeable,
right?
You know, like that's.
Chad, do you think they did anything well or differently with the humans in this movie that you want to highlight?
I mean, we don't get any humans that are in more than 2 of these, I think, right now, right? And like some of them are still alive theoretically, right? Like there's no reason that we couldn't get them back, right? Like, you know, we like Scarlet Witch could come back with her husband. Like, as far as we know, they're still alive, but they never did. You know, there's a bunch of like Millie Bobby Brown's character. Like, we saw her twice. She didn't come back for this one. We don't really know why. I do like the humans in this that at least, like, to your point, they each had an archetype, right? It's like Rebecca Hall's like brings the science angle, right? Like, we could have had the real skeptic, like the true skeptic, in whatchamacallit, in why am I blanking on
the podcaster?
The podcaster, yes.
Brian Tyree. I don't know the character's name, just the actor's name.
Yeah. You know, we get the childlike wonder from Gia. Like, Trapper Dan Stevens is kind of the comedy, but also like, right, in every movie we've had one of these people that like understands the natural world, right? Like, he's supposed to kind of bring that.
Ranger.
We just like, they just dial them all down to like 1s and 2s here, right? Like they
even give them like contrasting concepts. Like, again, he's not a skeptic. He's a guy who thinks outside the box. Like, we don't get, she's not really even a scientist because she's looking for information outside of science. Like, these people aren't even the caricatures of the character, you know? Like, they're just weird amalgamations of
we get the one Scottish dude who like is like, he's the only one where it's like the warning of like, he thinks he's the alpha of the group and like tragically learns that he is not inside of this world. Right? Like, he serves
incredible
his
death,
purpose.
by the way. Incredible death. I knew something bad was about to happen to him.
Not that,
but not that.
Yeah.
So it definitely caught me off guard.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, not a whole lot there. Well, let's talk about like where they could go. Yeah, when we get to the where they could go, I think there's a bunch of really interesting concepts here that they could take us to if they choose to.
Yeah, I agree. I before we do, and we can mix it up. I do want to make sure we talk about today the versatility of Godzilla and Kong.
Yes.
So I think it's really relevant, especially in contrast. We've already said to Godzilla -1 a couple times, but I say it because that's just a fundamentally different movie that has very different goals and yet has spectacle.
right?
But it also has all the things that we're saying that we want to see here, which is we want fleshed out human characters. We want character arcs. We want there to be emotional stakes. We want to be surprised in how the humans figure out how to fight Godzilla. Turns out in America, we just like blowing stuff up and punching stuff.
Yeah, pretty much.
But okay, we'll come back to that in a second. But Chad, let's just get this. Let's say though, where do they go next? because at this point, the MonsterVerse has successfully built up a crossover, Godzilla v Kong, and now a financially successful successor, Godzilla X Kong. So where do they take the franchise from here?
I mean, Caleb tuned it. Like, I think space is one of that. Like, so the interesting thing about the Monarch show is that it time hops, right? So like we could do that, right? Like we could get another movie like Skull Island where we like get Monarch in the 80s, right? Like we could get the X-Men version of this, right? Where we see like a couple of different things. And that show leaves it open for, I don't want to spoil it for you guys that haven't seen it, but like, there's like a bunch of stuff where you could fill in between, like how does Monarch all get from where they were in the 50s, which is where the show starts, all the way to like anti-grav hovercrafts, right? Like there's probably an interesting story, like human story there in the backdrop of this world. But I think like if they can build that, there's no reason they can't build spaceships. And to your point, like there is so much of the Godzilla lore that is like, even as cheesy as it was, like spaceships and spacecrafts and people from other planets and flying turtles that have children that can jump in their butt, right? Like I hadn't thought of it, but like bringing Gamera into this would be like insane, to the point that right, like I don't think I want it. Like I don't need a Mothra movie, I don't need a Rodan movie, but like
right,
a Gamera movie coming to this planet and like getting some kids and like telling a real interesting children's story and bringing like the Echo stuff into that could be super interesting if they do it really well.
Yeah.
I love the versatility. Let's tie back into the versatility conversation, but it is crazy to think, Chad, you outlined earlier that there is an animated series, a live action TV series, and then there's all these movies. It really does make the possibilities endless, because if they want to do like a spin-off, smaller scale, they have they've proven they can do that successfully.
Yeah.
Right.
Give me the like, I want like 45 minutes on Tiamat. Right. Like, I think it's crazy that they were like, oh, here's this awesome thing who has a badass name that like, right, is an actual, right, historically like mythology, but also, I don't know, like people of my generation just immediately go to Dungeons and Dragons when we hear Tiamat. Like that battle was ridiculous. That it happened kind of underwater and lasted 25 seconds. They've told us that there's all of these other Titans around. Like what are they doing? How do people live with them? Again, like that might be the TV show or the animated where like, give me more of a 6 30-minute episodes around each of the Titans and like where they're living around the world right now.
Yeah, I mean, Monster of the Week, right? You could do something along those lines. Caleb Haldane, you've already mentioned Planet X.
Yeah. But how do we get there, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
We got to get Biollante. We got to get Space Godzilla. Then we can go Planet X. That's
get a whole other trilogy we got to get through.
Exactly. Planet X is phase 2. We got to think big, people.
I'll give you one movie to get us to Planet, like that ends with us going to it. There's no way we're getting 3 movies that tee up eventually like another movie.
I'm just saying, because we've done frankly, I don't think we actually explored Hollow Earth that much. Despite the fact that we spent a lot of time in Hollow Earth, I feel like there's a lot we didn't explore about it in this movie. But we got the Hollow Earth movie, okay? So where do you go next? You go to space. Space is a part of the Godzilla lore.
Yeah.
It makes sense. Just take us there. You defeated the ancients on Earth. Now you got to defeat the aliens in space. And then your possibilities are kind of infinite. Unlike the Fast and Furious franchise, which I certainly think should do time travel as its capper movie, I think this one should avoid that. I think that would just make things even just too muddled, honestly.
I was gonna say, I mean, like if it exists in the Godzilla lore, but if Ludacris and Tyrese can go to space in Fast 9, then it's not out of the realm of possibility here. It actually makes more sense here. There's actually a precedent for this. Just like, but yeah, I think that's the next terrain. We have to go into space. We have to have a Godzilla in space, and I feel like that actually is more intriguing to me because that's something we haven't. I don't know if we've seen that, that version of it,
Have we gotten any aliens?
Have we gotten an alien?
in the Monarch?
Yeah.
Unless it was in the TV show.
No, I mean just that Ghidorah is not from
Ghidorah's
this
from
earth,
space.
right?
He's
So
an
like
alien.
that's the thing that they've left. That there's
That's
clearly like they're at least
Then absolutely,
are-
this is the uncharted.
Clean it up.
This is the uncharted territory. That's the only place.
And Ghidorah was already like when that movie starts, is the second movie. They're already here.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So like,
He's
the aliens
frozen
are
in
already
ice.
out. They're definitely out there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, he was frozen in ice, presumably by Shimu, I guess is like what we
Yeah,
can
I guess
retcon
so.
that to be.
Listen, just bring back Charles Dance, Tywin Lannister, give me some more monologuing, and just make him sound really sophisticated when he tells you that whole first thing was just a joke.
Yeah.
I'd be down.
Wait, it's gonna.
I mean, yes, like where he survived that movie, right?
yes,
Like
survived
he's
that.
theoretically in a prison somewhere. I guess maybe that's the assumption that he was caught.
My headcanon, he's out.
I think he's gone.
Oh, you
yeah.
think he's just like
But he's out, and then they showed a skull of Ghidorah at the end, right? So I think that's his treasure, or that's his trophy. He goes, takes it back to Planet X. They make Mecha King Godzilla, or I mean King Ghidorah, and or they just resurrect him from the skull, like whatever, and then they come back.
well, there were two skulls there were only two skulls in VCon, right? Godzilla VCon,
right,
So there are theoretically two other skulls out
thirds?
there.
right,
Because like he grew on one of his heads.
Right.
Again, I just watched this, or else I would not remember any of that. So yes, like we could get a Pacific Rim style.
Please.
He was able to capture the skull and do some weird stuff with it. I will say, like, we could, if we just want to get rid of humans completely, right? Like, let's just say that's also.
It looks like they're trying to.
That's what they seem to be. We could get the like destroy all monsters-esque, like let's just go 10 million years ago and see the War of the Titans, where like they eventually get rid of King Ghidorah. Like, how do we freeze King Ghidorah? Right? They've laid all of that work. Right? We've seen that like the great apes and let's just go pre-human civilization, and then we don't need humans, right? Like we just get 2 hours of.
That's the end of phase 1. We tease Planet X. We don't say anything about it. We just tease it, and then boom, phase 2, the lead up for.
Yeah, it's just the opening. Like we get a voiceover of it, right? And it ends, and we pull back from Earth to Planet X. Like who was like,
and who's there? Charles Dance.
Charles Dance is like, we're also gonna say that he's 10 million years old. Like
right?
Oh yeah,
why not?
Yeah, why not?
I guess sure, yes. Like it turns out they're actually cloner, right? We're gonna bring cloning technology. Like it's just he propagates himself over and over.
Yeah.
Even better. That explains the immortality cloning. Let's go. I'm all into it. I think that's, as long as the premises for these continue to be fun, that's really it. I will say the Godzilla and Kong in the same movie thing, I really don't think that's necessary. I mean, that's the problem, is that's the marketable thing. Obviously, they've proven when they're in the same movie together on the poster together, it puts
Numbers
butts
go
in
up.
seats.
Right. But it's just like you said, it's the Avengers of this world, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't mean you have to continually put Avengers movies out there. You can still have your one-offs.
Well, I tend creatively, I definitely agree with you, but I will also say none of the individual movies made nearly as well as this movie. So we'll see. I would love for them to do spin-off though, because then we can get more weird Godzilla shenanigans. The Kong movies are definitely not, they're weird in a different way. And I kind of like I think the human characters actually in the Kong movies are a little
Did we
notable, but yeah.
like we never did what were there any like King Kong versus Godzilla like Toho movie? Like he does show up.
The very third movie, I think, was the third movie, maybe it was the fourth, was King Kong versus Godzilla. Yeah,
Back in like the 60s or 70s. Okay. Before outside of the like King Kong, Son of Kong, Mighty
not
Joe
look
Young,
like King
all
Kong.
that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, they couldn't get Harryhausen's models, so they end up making a rubber suit, but that was not what was supposed to happen. It was supposed to be this like spliced live action on one plate and stop motion on the other plate, and they were supposed to try to make them interact.
Wow.
And without Harryhausen's models, they just couldn't do it themselves. It just wasn't. They just didn't look right, and so they went with rubber suit, and he looks terrible.
Gotcha. All right, I'm gonna have to look for that one then.
Same. I need to go back.
But
Full circle.
in that one, he does get supercharged by lightning, and in Versus, he gets supercharged by lightning as well. And I think that's a callback to that movie.
That's deep.
Fan
Deep cuts.
That's fan service. I love it.
Yes.
So is he gonna go Super Saiyan? What power level did he get to in this one? Because he charges up a few different levels in this one. Yeah,
I'm more impressed by Godzilla's charge up. He gets purple now.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. In this one, yeah, he levels up. I mean, I guess Kong did charge up too because he got the power glove. Yeah. 3 times because he has the regular, and then he goes blue, and then pink. Is that the next one? Okay,
exactly.
so 3rd level. Okay, so Godzilla has been up to level 3.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, they could go reverse Dragon Ball
charge.
and like Kong is back on Earth under a full moon, and he actually turns into a small boy, right? Like he just shrinks, and that's how we get the human angle. The like space, the Planet Zero people just put a fake moon out all the time to get rid of Kong.
Yeah.
I mean, Dragon Ball Z. I mean, Goku is the Monkey King, so I mean, it's all there. It's all there. All right. Well, I want to circle back on this last point here because I do think it's important in terms of how we think about Godzilla and Kong within pop culture. What would we say makes these characters so versatile? I.e., you can get big, dramatic, character-driven films simultaneously with the same character doing something crazy, spectacle-filled, super dumb. It's all about the visuals. What makes these characters so versatile in terms of how they're deployed in stories across the spectrum?
Well, I mean, I think because of their scope and, and their kind of symbolic existence, they're able to be used again as spectacle or as a stand-in for bigger philosophical ideas or, or the commentary on, the impact of war and destruction and colliding countries with one another. And I think that's where it becomes very interesting and more, I think, impactful. And I think that's why something like Godzilla -1 works so well is because, as you mentioned, the human drama is just as strong as the spectacle in that film, and the tension behind showing, we still get the spectacle that we like, the tearing and destruction of everything, but it has so much more of an emotional stake because of what's happening around that, and we're so invested in what's happening on the ground in this particular country from the historical implications, and it makes that whole it makes the drama that much more powerful, I think. So so there's ways you can use these. You can use them as cookie cutter characters to smash things apart, but I don't think you have to completely, like remove that other element, to make the story have, a lasting longevity. So.
Well, and Caleb Haldane, I'm curious because you have seen all of the Godzilla movies. So, I mean, you've seen him in every which form. What would you say makes the character so versatile in terms of how he's deployed in stories?
Well, I think that, even though as we create iterations and new things, we water down his initial, impetus, I don't think it ever goes away. He will always be that stand-in for the atomic bomb. And we will see that in him, even now when he's not used in that same way. It's also kind of a talk about the escalation of armaments, right? Like this is what happens when it's no longer in our control, but that's just a metaphor for our governments having control. Like we only have the illusion of control over our governments. And as these governments escalate and escalate and escalate, we're creating titans that walk among our planet. And so that's really resonates today more than ever and will always resonate in the future because I just don't see us moving away from this posturing type of thing until we have some sort of massive unifying event And that is.
You mean a civil war? No. Whoa, sorry, guys.
Stay tuned for our next week's episode. Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying though, because they have obviously the origin of Godzilla, which again is sort of a reflection on the nuclear bomb, atomic energy, and sort of the impact it had on Japan. But now it's sort of taken on this large than life character that's a stand-in for our governments, which is hence why Godzilla's fighting so many different monsters, who all sort of represent different
geographic areas,
or concepts or values sometimes. Chad, what do you think about that? What do you think makes these characters so versatile?
I mean, the versatility comes from just their ubiquity of like everybody know. Eventually, you just get to an age where like you at least know Godzilla and King Kong, right? Like you've been exposed to them through something, through toys, through cartoons, through a movie, through a right? Like they've kind of been everywhere, even if you don't know. Right, that like Godzilla was an atomic age, right, and King Kong, right, initially is like about like man trying to control nature, and right, like you don't have to know all of that to just know who these characters are. So I think one that makes them versatile because you can kind of overlay whatever you want on them, and because right, like this MonsterVerse version is not the first reboot, right? I think we would all feel differently, but like there have been kind of 3 major eras of Godzilla before we got to this, right? Like there's
Heisei, there's the one before that, there is the 80s era, then there's the 90s era, which is very different as well. And so there's actually been more like 7 eras.
So like no one's here complaining about like right? Like there's no like complaints about rebooting of Godzilla or rebooting of King Kong, which I think also makes them versatile because they've already been rebooted. They've faced a lot of the same people already, right? Like there's a ton, like we were talking about, even if you don't know the lore, there's a ton of it. And there's no one that feels like, I don't think you even have to watch all the MonsterVerse movies to enjoy this last one, let alone watching 50 other Godzilla movies, in order to kind of get what this movie is about. So I think that's the versatility. While I would love for them to have kind of something more to say about some of these things, like the Japanese versions have over the years, I mean, I think we also just kind of have to own up that like at this point, Legendary is owned by a Chinese company and an American private equity firm. Like, I don't know that we're going to get the kind of anti-capitalist, we're polluting our planet too much from like either one of those companies. So this is kind of all I think we may be able to hope for with just some of these other stories coming in around the edges. That's just like the pragmatist in me and trying to understand like what it takes to make $150 million movie in the year 2024. Like,
yeah,
definitely. No, I think that the business context is important to understand within the larger cultural context. So for me, I think what makes these characters so universal is they do represent ideas, and it's how they're contextualized differently. And you mean there's 7 different eras? Well, that's because there's a lot has changed in Japan over the decades. A lot's changed in America when we think about other characters. So Batman, Superman, other characters that have been rebooted dozens of times. I think the reason these characters have some sort of universal appeal is they are rooted in very universal, deeply felt human experiences or ideas and anxieties. But they're also very flexible because what those anxieties look like is different based on the cultural context or what creator is telling that story. What are the things that stick out to them? And a lot of times it reflects the cultural moment we're in now, which is why I'm glad that you brought up earlier that, hey, this movie had some opportunities to sort of have something, even if it didn't say anything about the idea of give that podcaster an arc about trying to reclaim his credibility sort of thing. Even that is more reflective than what we get, which is why I think this movie fundamentally fails in terms of really representing Godzilla or Kong in a really meaningful way. Outside of these are 2 icons, let them fight. kind of takes you back to the playground. You know what I mean? It's action figures.
I think it's very telling that we've done almost a 2-hour podcast and never once talked about Scar. Like, that's how forgettable this guy is, and that's how much I think that they did a disservice of writing. Like, he never should have showed up in Act 1 or been alluded to in Act 1, because I just don't care about him in Act 1. I care about Godzilla and Tiamat in Act 1. Why are you showing me cameras of Base 1 getting destroyed? Shouldn't have happened there. That should have happened in Act 2 when we care about that base, because we just don't yet, you know? And I think that really hurt Scar. I feel like he is a villain that could have had a story, and he is just as flat as the humans are. So we really don't know what drives him or anything. We don't know why he doesn't leave the fire pits. Like, none of that makes any sense, and they don't try to wrap it up nicely, and we don't even talk about him this episode because of just how meaningless he is.
It's fair. I actually, yes,
I forgot about him.
I forgot about him. So, you know, there's here's the best analogy I can come up with Scar is just, he reminded me so much of Lanky Kong from Donkey Kong 64. I couldn't unsee it, but I was like, whatever, let them fight the thing. And he did have the moment where he was on top of the giant frozen dragon.
That
was pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, again, there's no meaning behind that character. It's just, wow, that's a cool image, right? But what does it mean? Even in the and even in the context of the movie, it means nothing, right, at all, unfortunately. And then also the new little baby apes, little Diddy Kong, right? It's got to be
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know, Chad. What are your Scar takes?
I mean, I don't know that these movies like have a villain problem, because it kind of doesn't matter who the villain is. I mean, until I feel like until it does. To your point, there probably is an interesting thing there. Again, like, how does Scar live? Like, is he the same one that is theoretically thousands of years old that was, you know, foretold in this prophecy on the floor, or is there, or in that room, or you know, is there something else keeping them alive? There's a lot of interest that, you know, he's a crappy villain who clearly was going to get his ass kicked until he, you know, has the magical shard from the fire breathing dog, or the ice breathing dog that he's also able to control. And again, like, why do all of those followers, like, he would be he's a typical like playground bully, right? And like,
Yeah.
he gets taken down very easily, and should have been taken down sooner. So I don't know that we're supposed to, other than it's the reason for the two of them to team up. You know, I mean, we also didn't talk about, like, we talked about the pyramids getting destroyed, but like, I love that they show how smart Kong is actually in this movie, right? He's got all those like traps. He's got like, he pre-plans all these things to the point where like, he thinks Godzilla is actually gonna, like, when Godzilla heeds his call and he shows up in, we'll just say Egypt, depending on which city we think that they're actually in. He is legitimately, like, one of the best parts of the movie, he is legitimately surprised when Godzilla just wants to beat him up, right? He's like, yeah, you came. We're gonna go in the, wait, what? Like, he has, why are you fighting me? We gotta go in the hole. We gotta get in the hole. That's the important piece. And Godzilla, like, just doesn't care, right? He doesn't understand. He just, like, Godzilla just is responding to what, like, he thinks Kong is the reason that he's been powering up, I guess is what we're supposed to believe. So
also ambiguous,
totally ambiguous, of like, just other than the fact that, much like Madam Web, Godzilla apparently can see the future, but only in brief glimpses.
Or has instincts that we don't understand because they're not our ways. They're not our instincts. So we just have to roll with it, I guess.
So I do think that they hint at the answer there, and that's the 3 signals is like triggering Godzilla, and it's probably from a battle long ago, like from the battle that is alluded to in Versus, actually. So I think that because they're signaling this again, it's like, yeah, that time that you were defeated in the temple, we're making that same signal that you remember. And so they're tapping into that part of his animalism to trigger him. That's very loosely hinted at, and I'm extrapolating a lot. So I understand that like I'm giving it leeway here, but it could work, and I could see that as why.
There's a precedent for why Godzilla would just start powering up based off of instinct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Sure. That is because like the Iwi put the call out, right? Like not because Scar is such a powerful villain.
Now they're worried about Scar, but then again, like we don't see why they are worried. Like the whole thing just gets too muddy and messy, and there's not a defined reason that we should fear Scar. And that is the major problem. Even though he destroys base 1, we're the interlopers there. Like it doesn't track that this is enough for us to think Scar is a villain.
In fact, I mean, obviously he's Scar is an evil leader, that's bullying all of, their civilization in the Hollow Earth. But, you could read this as an imperialist movie where Kong goes down and is like, we know what's best. We're going to knock your leader off. I mean, that's, I don't think this movie thought that hard about it.
I was going to say, that's a little bit of a reach, but, but
yeah. I mean, we could have gotten the backstory where Scar killed his brother in order to take over the apes, who were actually living pretty peacefully before then. But, he had bigger ambitions.
His brother was
and killing his brother.
And his brother was named Mufasa.
I mean, look, Scar was prepared. Okay, like he.
So this is like actually a what if, but Scar was an ape, and Simba never came
back.
There's
the crossover.
There it is.
Yeah, like what if? Simba just left to Skull Island and grew up there. I think that is the potential. Flat line there.
Yes.
Guys, I think we've already written a better movie. I'm just going to be very clear. Well, guys, this podcast, we're creeping up on 2 hours on the money. And, that's actually longer. Another compliment I should pay to this movie is this movie was under 2 hours, which means this podcast is now longer than the movie. With that said, any closing thoughts or things you want to share about Godzilla x Kong before we close out today's conversation?
I'm excited for whatever the next one is. Like I'll be there opening weekend. Like that's kind of all it did the job. I also the other thing we're talking about, like it did not there. Not only was there not a post credits, the credits were just credits. Like there was nothing. You even in some of the other ones, we've at least gotten that kind of cool monarchy like files with the kind of the classified stuff. We got none of that here, which tells me like they don't have a plan, and they don't even want to allude to a plan of like what comes next.
I do genuinely think that this franchise is an inflection point. Whatever they do next is going to be the next movie is going to be really important in terms of sort of picking a direction to go in.
Yeah.
And I think you're right, Chad. Either they don't have a plan or they have not decided what the plan is, because they could do anything.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Blue sky.
Well, I'm with you. I can't wait. Whatever it is, I'm down. I don't care about these movies enough to be disappointed by them, but I do enjoy them enough to look forward to them, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So sign me up. I'm very pumped. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us on our review of Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire. Hey, if our listeners want to keep up with you and your work online, where can they follow you at? Chad Parizman, I'll start with you.
I am C. Parizman anywhere that I want to be found. If you are looking for help with your podcast, hit me up. I'm at adercoms.com, ADER.coms.com.
Check him out. He's got some cool podcasts. Caleb Haldane, my nemesis. Where can people follow you and the cool things you're doing online?
I've been taking a bit of a hiatus as of late, but a lot of our stuff is still up on our RedSix to Golden Corral YouTube channel. So check that out while we brew some new things.
Very cool. Soonercon coming soon?
Yep, that we're working full steam on that, and it's gonna be a good year.
Yeah, coming up in June, ladies and gentlemen. Check it out. The website, Soonercon's website. Laron Chapman.
Listeners can follow my film review column, Real Insights with Laron Chapman, on thecinematropolis.com.
And he's had some great horror write-ups, ladies and gentlemen. Check them out. Getting a lot of traction.
A lot before October too. I'm like, wow, they're spoiling me with horror this year. So
Now, was that horror write-ups?
You know,
Okay.
Horror.
Was this-
the column's a lot different than the yes.
Well, as always, you can find me on the cinematropolis.com or on social medias, C Masters Talk. That's letter C Masters Talk. That's all the stuff. Letterboxd is probably the one that means the most to me right now, or Instagram, I guess. Well, hey, Chad, Caleb, Laron, thanks so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thank you.
And listeners, thanks so much for joining us. We'll catch you again next time when things get the opposite of this movie, super serious, when we review Alex Garland's Civil War, possibly even his last film as a director. We will see. Till next time.